It's great to have you all here today. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Cindy Meier. I'm one of the co-founders of the Rogue Theater and the director of this production of Playboy, the Western World. And I want to thank Jerry James for his wonderful essay. And I'd also like to thank Julia Royal for her sponsorship of this talk. All right, you ready?
Yes.
Great. In his introduction to the Playboy, the Western World, John Millington Synge wrote, "In Ireland, for a few years more, we have a popular imagination that is fiery and magnificent and tender, so that those of us who wish to write start with a chance that is not given to writers where the springtime of the local life has been forgotten." This is what I'm calling the Irish folk imagination, which, as far as I can tell, is indeed fiery, magnificent, and tender. Over the next 40 minutes or so, I'll be talking about how that folk imagination became realized on the Irish stage through the work of John Millington Synge and his associates. We'll conclude with a little peek at the first scene of our production of the Playboy, the Western World. Playboy was first produced in Dublin in 1907. It was at the forefront of a movement which featured the beginning of the Irish National Theatre, a national theatre that would give voice to the experiences of the Irish people. Now understand that for years, Ireland had been subjugated by England. By the late 19th century, Ireland was politically disenfranchised, economically exploited, and culturally suppressed under English rule. This combination of oppressive laws, land confiscation, and religious discrimination fueled the rise of Irish nationalism, which sought independence and the revival of the Irish identity. Now, all Irish writers, but especially Irish playwrights in particular, wrote about this oppression and discrimination by the British. Irish dramatic literature as a whole reflects two distinct perspectives on Irish identity. These perspectives are called the colonial and the diasporic. Now, the two strands are shaped by Ireland's history of British colonization and large-scale immigration. And let me talk about these two strands of Irish dramatic literature. The diasporic strand of Irish drama refers to theatrical work that emerges from the experience of Irish immigrants and their descendants living outside of Ireland. Many playwrights, including Oscar Wilde, Eugene O'Neill, and Brian Friel, didn't grow up in Ireland, but their plays reflect the search for belonging of the Irish diaspora. Joe coached me on this and I forgot. Diaspora. Reflecting the experience of millions of Irish people who left Ireland due to economic hardship, famine, or political reasons. These writers wrote as outsiders, which gave them a particular advantage in their ability to see human nature. Now, it's a curious fact that one of the most enduring comedies in the English language, Oscar Wilde's 1895 play, The Importance of Being Earnest, flowed from the pen of an Irish expatriate. Wilde possessed the edge and the edginess of the outsider. He was an observer of life's feast in his adopted land of England. Now, the second strand of Irish dramatic literature, the colonial strand, refers to the body of work that emerged in Ireland. These plays focused on the experience of living under colonial domination and the struggle for national identity. John Millington Synge was at the forefront of this movement, celebrating Irish language, folklore, history, and rural life. Many colonial plays contrast the authentic rural Ireland with the corrupt urban life, using the countryside as a symbol of Irish purity and tradition. The Playboy of the Western World is one of those plays. It explores the complexities of rural life, but at the same time critiques the romanticization of the Irish peasantry. Now, as Synge began writing at the turn of the 20th century, three people came together to form a movement toward a distinct Irish national theater. These people were the poet William Butler Yeats, playwright Lady Augusta Gregory, and a wealthy landowner, Edward Martyn. I want to talk for a moment about each of these important figures without whom the Playboy of the Western World would not exist. First is William Butler Yeats, the poet who would go on to be the first Irish writer to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923. He's widely known for his great poem, The Second Coming, with the famous line, "And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born." That Yeats believed that the arts, particularly literature and theater, had the power to inspire a sense of national consciousness among the Irish people. He had a deep interest in Irish mythology, folklore, and the supernatural, which he saw as essential elements of Ireland's cultural heritage. He believed that Irish drama would be a means to reintroduce Ireland's mythological past to contemporary audiences, reinforcing a sense of pride in Irish traditions. Yeats was critical of the commercial theaters in Dublin and London, which mostly produced melodramas and light entertainment. He sought to create a more serious, intellectual form of drama that would elevate the minds of the audience rather than merely entertain them. Sound familiar? The second figure in this triumvirate was Lady Augusta Gregory, widow of the colonial administrator Sir William Gregory. Lady Gregory's plays often drew from Irish mythology, history, and rural life. Lady Gregory was also deeply involved in the collection of traditional stories, which contributed to the revival of the Irish language. Her financial backing also ensured the future of the theater. Now, the third person, Edward Martyn, introduced Yeats and Lady Gregory to one another. Martyn was a playwright and a fiction writer himself, and he essentially underwrote the first 3 years of what would become the Irish National Theatre in Dublin. It was important to have a home for Irish drama in order to establish a national theatre. As Joe McGrath and I discovered when we founded the Rogue Theatre, people think of a theatre as a where, not a who. Without Martyn's financial support, the dream of an Irish National Theatre may never have survived without a where. Now, in 1891, Yeats had been researching Irish myths and legends, and it was through this interest that he came in contact with Lady Gregory. Together, Yeats and Lady Gregory would produce many significant works, including plays, essays, and translations of Irish myths. Together, they wrote a play called Kathleen Ní Houlihan in 1902. Now, the story in Kathleen Ní Houlihan unfolds in a rural Irish cottage on the eve of a young man's wedding. While the family is in the midst of preparations, a mysterious old woman enters the cottage. She speaks in cryptic, poetic language about how her 4 green fields, symbolizing the 4 provinces of Ireland, were taken from her, and she laments the loss of her land. The old woman represents Ireland personified, a colonized Ireland under British rule. As she speaks, the old woman tells stories of young men who gave their lives fighting for her, implying that true patriotism requires sacrifice. Her powerful words captivate the young man. Despite his upcoming marriage, he is deeply moved by her and her plea for men to fight for Ireland's freedom. In the climax of the play, The young man abandons his family and wedding plans, choosing instead to follow the old woman and join the fight for Irish independence. As the old woman leaves, she is mysteriously transformed into a beautiful young woman, symbolizing how Ireland will be rejuvenated through the sacrifices of those who fight for her cause. The play concludes with the young man leaving to fight for Ireland, while his family watches in shock and awe. So this was a play that Yeats and Lady Gregory wrote together. Now, in the summer of 1897, at the home of Count de Bassereau overlooking Galway Bay, that provided the setting for afternoon tea, when Yeats, Martin, and Lady Gregory found themselves discussing the need for a theater in Dublin. Lady Gregory writes of this tea party, "The talk turned on plays. Mr. Martin had written 2 which had been offered to London managers, and now he thought of trying to have them produced in Germany, where there seemed to be more room for new drama than in England. I said it was a pity we had no Irish theater where such plays could be played. Mr. Yeats said that had always been a dream of his, but he had of late thought it an impossible dream, for it could not at first pay its way, and there was no money to be found for such a thing in Ireland. We went on talking about it, and things seemed to grow possible as we talked. And before the end of the afternoon, we had made our plan. We said we would collect money, or rather ask to have a certain sum of money guaranteed. We would take a Dublin theater and give a performance of Mr. Martin's Heatherfield and one of Mr. Yeats' own plays, The Countess Kathleen. I offered the first guarantee of £25. Together, Lady Gregory, William Butler Yeats, and Edward Martin wrote a kind of manifesto in 1903 for the start of the Irish National Theatre. We proposed to have performed in Dublin in the spring of every year certain Celtic and Irish plays, which, whatever be their degree of excellence, will be written with a high ambition, and so to build up a Celtic and Irish school of dramatic literature. We hope to find in Ireland an uncorrupted and imaginative audience trained to listen by its passion for oratory, and believe that our desire to bring upon the stage the deeper thoughts and emotions of Ireland will ensure for us a tolerant welcome and that freedom to experiment which is not found in the theaters of England, and without which no new movement in art or literature can succeed. We will show that Ireland is not the home of buffoonery and of easy sentiment, as it has been represented, but the home of an ancient idealism." Now, before I go on to talk about John Millington Synge's contributions and relationship to this triumvirate, it's important to mention 2 other figures in the creation of the National Irish Theatre: the acting talent and further financial support. Plays don't just happen, of course. They need to be realized by actors and funded by supporters. At the turn of the 20th century, actor and director William Fay created a new acting style in Ireland that emphasized realism and a distinctive connection to Irish culture. William Fay sought to break away from the artificial and melodramatic conventions of the Victorian stage, introducing a more authentic approach to acting rooted in realism. He focused on making performances feel more natural and less reliant on exaggerated gestures or vocal flourishes. His aim was to portray characters in a way that reflected the complexities of real life rather than the theatrical tropes of the time. He thought that actors should reflect the rhythms, speech patterns, and emotional textures of ordinary people. This shift helped the Irish National Theatre distinguish itself from other European traditions that were more formal or artificial. William Fay was also known for incorporating elements of the Irish language into his performances. The focus on the Irish idiom and accent helped foster a more recognizable, homegrown theatrical tradition that resonated with Irish audiences. In his productions, he emphasized clarity and emotional truth over elaborate stage techniques or ornate spectacle. This approach to acting set the tone for many subsequent Irish actors and directors who would continue to prioritize naturalistic performances that spoke to the Irish experience. Faye's style of acting became equated with the poetic realism of Synge's plays. One more important figure, Miss A.E. Hausman, who was an English tea heiress. She played a significant role through her financial support. She helped to fund the purchase and refurbishment of the Abbey Theatre building in 1904 in Dublin. Her financial investment allowed the Irish National Theatre to have a permanent home, providing a stable platform for Irish playwrights and actors to showcase their work. So, how did playwright John Millington Synge fit into all of this? Synge was born in County Dublin in 1871 into a middle-class family. His father, a barrister, died when Synge was young, leaving the family financially strapped. Synge eventually enrolled at Trinity College, where he studied modern languages. However, his interests soon shifted toward a broader range of artistic pursuits, and after completing his studies in Dublin, he moved to Paris to further his education in the arts. During this time, he studied music and composition before shifting his focus toward writing. Synge met W.B. Yeats in Paris in 1896. Synge also incidentally met James Joyce in Paris, about whom he later wrote to Lady Gregory, saying, "I cannot think he will ever be a poet of importance. But his intellect is extraordinarily keen, and if he keeps fairly sane, he ought to do excellent essay writing." Anyway, it was Yeats who encouraged Synge to return to Ireland. Yeats suggested he spend 6 weeks in the Aran Islands in Galway Bay on the west coast of Ireland, remote from books and the conventional lives of cities. Yeats recommended that Synge seek his themes in the desolate, stony places of Ireland rather than the libraries of Europe. Once there, Synge studied the picturesque life of the islanders, their struggle for subsistence, their racy speech with its Anglo-Irish idiom, their unsophisticated outlook, and the mingled humor and pathos of a primitive civilization, untouched by industrialization. In this western outpost of Europe, he found something he had missed in his wanderings in Europe. He also found himself, as Yeats had confidently predicted he would. It was here, in the Aran Islands, that Synge encountered the raw elemental forces of nature and life that would come to define his plays. The islanders, whose lives were harsh and shaped by the rhythms of the sea, became his muse, and their stories and dialects permeated his works. The islanders' passionate attachment to their land and their often tragic lives provided Synge with rich material for his plays. His first serious work was a book about the Aran Islands, published in 1907. The book conveys Synge's belief that beneath the Catholicism of the islanders, it was possible to detect a substratum of the pagan beliefs of their ancestors. Synge was unique among the Irish playwrights of his time because of his willingness to depict the absurdity and sometimes brutal nature of life in rural Ireland. While Yeats and Lady Gregory celebrated the mythical and romantic aspects of Irish culture, Synge's approach was more grounded in realism. His work focused not on idealized Irish heroes or legends, but on the flaws, contradictions, and complexities of ordinary people. He wrote, "I do not believe in the possibility of a purely fantastic, unmodern, ideal, breezy, spring day-ish, heroic national theater. No drama can grow out of anything other than the fundamental realities of life, which are never fantastic, are neither modern nor unmodern, and as I see them, rarely spring day-ish or breezy or heroic." One of Synge's first plays, Riders to the Sea, is a one-act tragedy that centers on a mother who mourns the loss of her sons to the sea. The play reflects Synge's deep understanding of both the inevitability of death and the connection between the people and the harsh landscape in which they live. I recently read Riders to the Sea and was impressed with its evocative, allegorical moodiness full of ghosts and death and remembrance on a bare island off the coast of Ireland. The plot is spare, really barely there at all. The characters are dark, and yet the story is somehow deeply moving. I'd really love to see a production of it. But Synge's most famous play is the one the Rogue is opening next week, The Playboy of the Western World. The play tells the story of Christy Mann, a young man who arrives in a small village claiming to have killed his father. His tall tale of patricide makes him a hero to the villagers, especially the women, who are attracted to his bravado and rugged charm. The young woman who runs the pub, Pegeen, falls in love with him. However, when the truth about the killing is revealed, the villagers' admiration turns to scorn. Now, at its heart, The Playboy of the Western World explores the tension between myth and reality, the power of storytelling, and the shifting dynamics of community. It also speaks to our desire for a hero, and what happens when the brutality that makes him a hero becomes too real. Synge's use of humor and tragic irony, combined with his deep understanding of Irish speech and folklore, elevates the play from a simple comedy to a work that explores deep cultural themes. Now, the Abbey Theatre, home of the Irish National Theatre, officially opened on December 27, 1904. The Abbey Theatre's mission was, and still is, to create a national theatre that showcases Irish culture, history, and identity. After the first plays opened in the newly refurbished Abbey Theatre with funds from Miss Houseman, they toured a handful of Irish plays to London and Glasgow, where they performed to truly rave reviews. Synge's plays, in particular, appealed to the London critics. The clarity of the speaking and the unfussy stage business, thanks to William Fay and his acting company, were sources of astonishment and admiration, and it seemed that for the first time in English language drama since the Middle Ages, the hewers of wood and drawers of water were given the leading roles. In this first production of Playboy, William Fay played Christy Mann, the Playboy, and Pegeen was portrayed by a young newcomer, Molly Allgood, whom John Millington Synge fell in love with. It would not be the first or the last time that a playwright fell in love with an actress portraying a character he created. However, Synge came from an Anglo-Irish Protestant background, while Allgood was from a working-class Catholic family. In addition, Synge was 14 years older than Allgood. Their courtship was disapproved of by Synge's family, particularly his mother, who opposed the idea of their marriage. They never wed. But back to Playboy. The reaction to Playboy in January 1907 was unexpected. Riots occurred during and following the opening performance of the play at the Abbey Theatre. The riots were stirred up by Irish nationalists who viewed the contents of the play as an offense to public morals and an insult against Ireland because it was based on a story of apparent patricide. They described the play as a vile and inhuman story told in the foulest language we have ever listened to from a public platform. With the pretext of a perceived slight on the virtue of Irish womanhood in the line, a drift of chosen females standing in their shifts, maybe, a shift being a nightgown, a significant portion of the crowd rioted, causing the remainder of the play to be acted out in dumb show. A first-hand account of the opening of the play described it like this. Immense crowds gathered to see the play and made a terrific uproar during the performances. One could not hear the actors. The audience kept up a continual howling, growling, hooting, and hissing. Some made hideous noises with tin trumpets. But despite the maddening din, the actors continued to play. The disturbance was by no means confined to the interior of the theater. In the parlance of the man in the street, a regular free-for-all went on outside. Hundreds of policemen were vainly endeavoring to dispel the crowd, but found it a hopeless task. It was this play of Synge's that brought the Abbey Theatre into the spotlight of the world. And English director Ben Payne, who was in attendance at the opening, wrote, "The next day, after long discussions, the directors Lady Gregory, W.B. Yeats, and John Millington Synge, a little bewildered but wholly defiant, decided to go on with the performances no matter how riotous the audience. And even if the theater had to be half filled with police. Yeats had been the most resolute spokesman for the policy, and I remember how much I admired the far-sightedness of his assurance that it was imperative that they should assert their right at all costs to produce what they believed was good art, or be forever dictated by mob prejudice. The opinion of the press soon turned against the rioters, and the protests petered out. 2 years later, in May of 1909, Playboy was revived at the Abbey Theatre to tumultuous applause, although Synge would never hear that applause, as he died from Hodgkin's disease 2 months before the revival. Many years later, Yeats would declare to rioters who were now rioting at the opening of Sean O'Casey's pacifist drama, The Plough and the Stars, he said, "You have disgraced yourself again. Is this to be the recurring celebration of the arrival of Irish genius?" In 1911, the Abbey Theatre Company of Players toured the United States with 15 Irish plays, one of which was the Playboy of the Western World. The company traveled to 31 cities in the United States over 5 months. Wow. Among those who saw all the plays was the 23-year-old Eugene O'Neill, who later said that the Abbey provided a glimpse of my opportunity. Synge wrote a beautiful introduction to his play that I'd like to read to you, not only for what it says about the play, but for what it says about the playwright's process. In writing The Playboy of the Western World, as in my other plays, I have used 1 or 2 words only that I have not heard among the country people of Ireland, or spoken in my own nursery before I could read the newspapers. A certain number of the phrases I employ I have heard also from herdsmen and fishermen along the coast from Kerry to Mayo, or from beggar women and ballad singers nearer Dublin. And I am glad to acknowledge how much I owe to the folk imagination of these fine people. Anyone who has lived in real intimacy with the Irish peasantry will know that the wildest sayings and ideas in this play are tame indeed, compared with the fancies one may hear in any little hillside cabin in Gisela or Carraroe or Dingle Bay. All art is a collaboration, and there is little doubt that in the happy ages of literature, striking and beautiful phrases were as ready to the storyteller's or the playwright's hand as the rich cloaks and dresses of his time. It is probable that when the Elizabethan dramatist took his inkhorn and sat down to his work, he used many phrases that he had just heard as he sat at dinner from his mother or his children. In Ireland, those of us who know the people have the same privilege. When I was writing The Shadow of the Glen some years ago, I got more aid than any learning could have given me from a chink in the floor of the old Wicklow house where I was staying that let me hear what was being said by the servant girls in the kitchen. This matter, I think, is of importance, for in countries where the imagination of the people and the language they use is rich and living, it is possible for a writer to be rich and copious in his words, and at the same time to give the reality, which is the root of all poetry, in a comprehensive and natural form. In the modern literature of towns, however, richness is only found in sonnets or prose poems or in 1 or 2 elaborate books that are far away from the profound and common interests of life. On the stage, one must have reality, and one must have joy. And that is why the intellectual modern drama has failed, and people have grown sick of the false joy of the musical comedy that has been given them in place of the rich joy found only in what is superb and wild in reality. In a good play, every speech should be as fully flavored as a nut or apple, and such speeches cannot be written by anyone who works among people who have shut their lips to poetry. In Ireland, for a few years more, we have a popular imagination that is fiery and magnificent and tender, so that those of us who wish to write start with a chance that is not given to writers in places where the springtime of the local life has been forgotten, and the harvest is a memory only, and the straw has been turned into bricks. So, why is the play titled The Playboy of the Western World? Of course, we today in the United States, we have associations with the word Playboy. Aside from the magazine, we usually define a playboy as a wealthy man who sets out to enjoy himself, a selfish pleasure seeker. But it is also a slang term adopted from the Irish, which means boy of the game, a champion athlete. Playboy can also mean a boy actor, which seems particularly relevant to Synge's Playboy, Christie, because he becomes a poet, a playwright, and an actor throughout the course of the play. He's even given various costumes throughout the play to embellish his Playboy role. Christie ultimately tries on all the roles the community gives him: poet, lover, hero, and champion. His new awareness of these talents gives him the confidence to assert himself in the final moments of the play. Now, as many of you know, one of the foundations of the Rogue Theater's mission is a commitment to produce theater rich in language. The Playboy of the Western World is known for its use of the poetic, evocative Irish language, as Synge celebrates the lyrical speech of the Irish. This Irish speech is known as Hiberno-English. Now, Hiberno-English refers to the variety of English spoken in Ireland. It is shaped by the influence of the Irish language, Gaelic, and has its own distinct vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation features. The term Hiberno-English comes from Hibernia, the Latin name for Ireland, and it reflects the unique linguistic blend of English with elements of Irish culture and history. Now, some of the elements of Hiberno-English include unusual vocabulary and grammar, Gaelic syntax, and unique idioms. For example, in Gaelic, there are no direct words for yes or no. In the play Playboy, Christie asks Pegeen, "And you're not wedding him at all?" Pegeen responds with, "I wouldn't wed him if a bishop came walking for to join us here." She says no, without actually saying. Other unique expressions in Playboy include da, which means father. Poitín is the moonshine liquor that they drink. Potboy means a young man serving at a pub, a potboy. Christie Mann is hired as a potboy in this pub. Another phrase is Tuesday was a week, which means a week ago Tuesday. At one point in the play, the widow Quinn tells Pegeen, "I'm after meeting Sean Keogh below," which simply means I've just met Sean Keogh below. Synge endowed his herdsmen and vagrants, his publicans and fisherfolk, with a speech that was his own synthesis of Hiberno-English and the richly idiomatic Irish which he absorbed in the homes of the islanders. This poetic realism is heard in the dialogue of every character on stage. Listen to Sean Keogh, who is set to marry Pegeen at the beginning of the play. He says, "I stood a while outside wondering would I have a right to walk in and see you, Pegeen, and I could hear the cows breathing and sighing in the stillness of the air, and not a step moving any place from this gate to the bridge." Local farmer Jimmy Farrow claims, "I knew a party was kicked in the head by a red mare, and he went killing horses a great while, till he ate the insides of a clock and died." But nowhere is the poetry and color more vivid than in the Playboy himself, Christie Mann. Upon meeting Pegeen, he tells her about his father. "I'd come walking down where you'd see the ducks and geese stretched sleeping on the highway of the road, and before I'd pass the dunghill, I'd hear himself snoring out, a loud, lonesome snore he'd make the while he was sleeping. And he, a man, be raging at all times while he was waking. After he was drinking for weeks, he'd rise up in the red dawn and go out into the yard as naked as an ash tree in the moon of May, and fling clods against the visage of the stars till he's put the fear of death into the piglets and the screeching sows. There's so much poetry in these lines. Poetry filled with rural Irish life, the poetry of the common man. Images are painted with lovely alliteration and a beautiful lilt. Ducks and geese stretch sleeping on the highway of the road. It's not just ducks and geese sleeping in a road, but they're stretched sleeping. And they're in the highway of the road, which adds a lilting inflection to the line. Christie, in that speech, also talks about passing the dunghill. A coarse and perhaps surprising image, but one that is essential for rural life. Christie says that his father has a loud, lonesome snore, which is so much more than a snore. The snore is lonesome and loud, an opportunity for alliteration as well as a comment to his father's state of mind. Christie also says he'd rise up in the red dawn, more alliteration, and go out in the yard as naked as an ashtray in the moon of May. As naked as an ashtray in the moon, and as naked as an ash tree in the moon of May. Sorry, ash tree in the moon of May. As naked as an ash tree in the moon of May. In the moon of May. Ash tree. Now, with that phrase, if you say it the right way, you can see the silhouette of a leafless ash tree outlined against the moon, flinging clods against the visage of the stars. Now here's a man so angry with his place in the world that he flings clods of dirt at the stars until he's put the fear of death into the piglets and the screeching sows. Again, the animals of the farm are featured in the image with another bit of alliteration with the screeching sows. Now let me read it one more time. I'll try to say it right this time. I'd come walking down where you'd see the ducks and geese stretched sleeping in the highway of the road. And before I'd passed the dunghill, I'd hear himself snoring out, a loud, lonesome snore he'd make the while he was sleeping. And he, a man, be raging at all times when he was waking. After he was drinking for weeks, he'd rise up in the red dawn and go out into the yard as naked as an ash tree in the moon of May, and fling clods against the visage of the stars till he's put the fear of death into the piglets and the screeching sows. No wonder Pegeen falls in love with this unlikely poet in the play. Now, as you can see from our set, the play takes place in a pub. The Irish as a people value storytelling in their culture, and we know they value music. When I was in Ireland many years ago, I remember the bus driver on our tour of Ireland, Paddy was his name. I remember he sang for us a cappella with a rich Irish tenor. Everybody sings in Ireland. And I also remember, and I'm sure many of you who have traveled to Ireland have had the same experience, the number of pubs that had musicians, and I don't mean hired musicians. I mean everybody who comes to drink brought their instrument or their voice. The pub holds a central place in Irish community life due to its role as a social and cultural hub. It is more than just a place to drink. It serves as a space where people gather to connect, celebrate, and share stories. It's no wonder that the Playboy of the Western world takes place in a pub. Now, at the Rogue Theatre, we've produced 97 plays over our 20 years. 19 of them have been by Irish authors, nearly one a year. Each of these playwrights owe a debt to John Millington Synge. Synge's death at the age of 37 cut short a promising career, but his legacy endures through his plays. His influence on playwrights like Samuel Beckett, Eugene O'Neill, Sean O'Casey, Brian Friel, Marina Carr, Jez Butterworth, Martin McDonough, Connor McPherson, and dozens of others, further cements his place as one of the foremost dramatists of the 20th century. His understanding and capturing of the Irish folk imagination allows the voice and character of Ireland to live on in all of us. So, thank you. So, let me now present Bryn Booth and Aaron Chan to the stage, and we're going to present the opening moments of Playboy to the Western World. It's a very short scene, so you just get a taste, so you'll have to come back for more.
6 yards of stuff to make a yellow gown, a pair of lace boots with lengthy heels on them, and brassy eyes. A hat suited for a wedding day. A fine tooth comb to be sent with 3 barrels of porter in Jimmy Farrell's cart on the evening of the coming fair to Mr. Michael James Flaherty. With the best compliments of the season, Margaret Flaherty.
Where's your father?
He's coming. To Mr. Seamus Mulroy, wine and spirit dealer, Castle Bar.
I didn't see him on the road.
How would you see him? In a dark night this half hour gone by.
I stood a while outside wondering would I have a right to walk in and see you, Pegeen. And I could hear the cows breathing and sighing in the stillness of the air. And not a step moving any place from this gate to the bridge.
It's at the crossroads he is. Meeting Philly Cullen and a couple more going along with him to Kate Cassidy's wake.
And he's going that far in the dark night.
Yes, surely, and leaving me lonesome on this scruff of the hill. Isn't it long the nights are now, Shankyo, to be leaving a poor girl with her own self counting the hours to the dawn of day?
When we're wedded in a short while, you'll have no call to complain. For I've little will to be walking off to wakes or weddings in the darkness of the night. Well,
You're making mighty certain, Shankyo, that I'll wed you now.
aren't we? After making a good bargain. We're only waiting on Father Riley's dispensation from the bishops, or the courts of Rome.
It's a wonder, Sean, the Holy Father be taking notice of the likes of you. For if I was him, I wouldn't bother with a place like this where you'll meet none but Red Linehan with a squint in his eye, or Sheen is lame in his heel, or the Mad Mulroney's were driven from California and lost their We're a queer lot to go troubling the Holy Father on his sacred seat.
If we are, we're as good here as another maybe.
As good as it? Where now will you meet the like of Deneen Sullivan knocked the eye from a policeman? Or Marcus Quinn, God rest him, got 6 months for maiming sheep? But where now will you meet the likes of them, I'm saying?
If you don't find them, it's good maybe, for Father Riley wouldn't have that kind walking around and talking to the girls.
Quit tormenting me with Father Riley when I'm only asking how I'll pass these 12 hours of dark and not take my death with fear.
Would I fetch you the widow Quinn, maybe?
That murderer? You'll not, surely.
Then I'm thinking your father will stay with you when he sees you taken on. For it'll be a long night time with great darkness. And I heard a kind of fella groaning in the ditch, groaning wicked like a maddening dog. It's good cause you have, maybe, to be fearing now.
What's that? Is it a man you've seen?
I couldn't see him at all, but I heard him groaning out and speaking his heart. Should have been a young man from his words.
And you never went near to see if he was hurt or what ailed him at all?
I did not, Pegeen. It's a dark, lonesome place to be hearing the like of him.
Well, you're a daring fellow. If they find his corpse stretched above in the dews of the dawn, what do you say then to the policeman?
I wasn't thinking of that. For the love of God, Pegeen, don't let on that I was speaking of him. Don't tell your father or the men coming, for if they heard that story, they'd have great blabbing this night at the wake.
I'll maybe tell them, and I'll maybe not.
They are coming at the door. Will you wish, I'm saying?
Wished yourself.